'Twas the night before Christmas, and all through the land, not a creature to be seen, and little Flame did not understand. Alone stood a cabin, with treasures in tow. He would need to think quickly before everything was covered in snow. This is the story of our dear little Flame, who wants to go home for Christmas, and must now speedrun the game. Welcome one, welcome all to Cuboid Outpost. This is a fun little beginner level mod pack, where we start in this barren wasteland of snow, and must slowly unlock more resources, until we eventually escape into the overworld. This will be a much quicker mod pack than the usual ones, but I thought it'd be a fun one to try out, especially at this time of year. So grab some hot cocoa and a fuzzy blanket, and watch as we quickly run through this pack. Starting off, we'll have to claim a couple introductory quests, until we finally get one that'll give us a pickaxe. I'll be basically ignoring the quest book for the rest of this run, since the majority of quests don't even give rewards. Inside our starting 82 system, we get a shovel, which we'll just use to expose some ores that we'll mine up with our pickaxe. I'm purposely setting up the ultimine to only do a mining tunnel, that way we won't have to deal with any mob spawns underneath. Then you can compress all those items using Shift or Control K, and toss some starting ore in the pulverizer. This mod pack has its own ores of varying tiers, with a total of 5, 3 of which we can get from mining the world. Mining these ores will give us silica, as well as some carbon deposits that we can turn into coal. The beginning of this mod pack can be a little grindy for speedrunning, but it is a good pace for those that are just starting out into modded Minecraft. Using some of our ore and silica, we can start making some furnaces, which we're going to be ending up using a lot of. Since we don't have any trees for wood yet, most of our crafts are just going to consist of all these ores. We're first going to need to craft up some sticks, which we can make out of some not-so-goodium ingots. Then I'll be using the tier 3 ore, not aphbadium, to make a pickaxe that we'll be using to mine for even more ores. Just make sure you don't cross any tunnels, that way we don't have to worry about any mob spawns early on. It's also very convenient for all the drops going in the same place. We'll turn some of those silica into silica blocks, which will then turn into a smusher. This is very similar to an ore hammer that you would see in the All the Mods packs, and it can be used to double our ores into dust, which is very helpful as we'll need tons of resources. But regular furnaces can be pretty slow, so let's actually upgrade those into blast furnaces using some silica blocks, which will double the speed of all our recipes. You could also just make a ton more furnaces, but this cuts down on micromanaging, and I think saves you more time in the end. So let's slowly get more resources, and keep upgrading our furnaces. At this point in time, you're going to start noticing that your hunger's going to be running out, so let's go ahead and craft up a bucket to solve that problem. The sink provided has some water in it, which we'll be using to make an infinite water source. This mod pack includes Pam's Harvest Craft, which means we can turn buckets of water into drinkable water, which is actually a fairly good food source. It's such a good food source that it's going to be the only food that I'll be eating for this entire run. The good old water diet. So after a lovely snack, it's back to the grind. Just be sure to space out your mining tunnels, that way they don't overlap and accidentally start spawning some mobs. Hey guys, just a quick announcement. Once this channel reaches 24,000 subscribers, I'm going to be doing a 24-hour live stream. So be sure you're subscribed if you want to see that, and join the Discord in the link below, where I'll put up some polls asking what you guys want to see during the live stream. I also hide a hidden phrase in every video, where the first person to find it will get a free month of subscription, and access to all my speedrunning guides. And just because it's the giving season, I decided to hide 3 different phrases throughout this video, which means there will be 3 lucky winners instead of 1. For more information on that, check the comments and description below. Now back to the video. We're eventually going to need a couple hundred of each resource, and I don't really want to wait that long, so I'm just going to add as many blast furnaces as I'm willing to micromanage. Just be sure that you're doubling all your ores, as these smushers are pretty easy to make. We're not going to be wanting to mine for all our resources forever, which luckily this mod pack does have a solution for. So I'm going to craft up half a stack of coal blocks, which we can use to turn into a singularity. We'll just have to toss those into a quantum collapser, and after not too long it should make us a singularity. The singularity on its own isn't going to generate resources for us. To do that, we'll have to first toss it into a resource generator. I'm going to be making a tier 2 resource generator, as I have nowhere near enough resources for the tier 3 one. So let's toss a couple of those down, and then toss in the singularities to start generating those resources. Don't worry too much if your resource generator is full. It has a little hidden buffer inventory, so no need to micromanage it. To make singularities for the ingots, we're going to need 320 of each, so for now I'm just going to craft up a singularity for the tier 1 ore. The big goal we have right now is unlocking dirt and a sapling, which means we'll have to craft up a few machines. So let's craft up a couple hoppers for the recipes, and we'll also need to mine up the controller from the ME network, but don't worry about that too much, as you can still access your items if you connect your drive up to the power. Over on the other side, we're also going to need to break our other machines, and don't worry about these as they're not really important anymore. we're basically tearing down everything that we started with, including this energy cube that's above the cables. These next few recipes are also going to require singularities of any type, so let's go ahead and make a couple coal singularities, as those are the easiest ones we can make right now. The first machine we'll be making is a molecular recycler, which will break down certain machines into core components that we'll be needing for crafting. Let's sleep off the night real quick using our sleep charm, and then up on the rooftop, reindeer paws, we'll pick up a wind generator and solar generator, and toss those in the recycler for some components. The main thing we're looking for right now is some redstone, which we'll be using to craft up the next machine. But before I craft that up, let's actually head back outside, and we're going to dig a hole straight down to the bottom layer. I can do it, I can do it, I can do it, and I can't do it. Don't worry, I make up for my lack of skill in Minecraft with my knowledge that I can just use /back. This bottom layer is made up of the tier 3 ore, which I'll be needing a ton of as I'll be combining it into higher tier ores. The not F-Badium ore also gives tons more silicon, which I'll be needing to make a silicon singularity. Now we can use that redstone to make a quantum transmutation chamber, which is a machine that we'll be needing for upgrading ores, as well as crafting up a few recipes. I do want to automate it with some hoppers, which can be a little annoying since you need a hopper in both from the top and from the side. While I get the other crafting recipes ready, I'll just toss in some of our ore into each hopper, that way we can start upgrading them into tier 4 ores. Breaking down some of the other machines will give us a head start on glass. We'll need to craft up more in a little bit using some silica, but for now I'm just going to turn them into bottles, which I'll be filling up with water for our recipe. Let's just add that into the queue in one of the hoppers, and in the other hopper we'll add some carbon deposits. Those together will make us some cellulose. At this point we have enough tier 2 ingots to make a tier 2 singularity, so let's start one of those up as well. And back down at the bottom of mine we need a little bit more silica, but after that we'll be done with mining for the rest of the mod pack. It takes a whole stack and a half of silica blocks to make a singularity, but we'll be needing tons of it for future crafts, so it's definitely a worthwhile investment. And now that we have plenty of silica going, we can start adding that to our blast furnaces to start making some glass. Then it's back to crafting up those bottles, that way we can start making even more cellulose. We'll also combine glass and blocks of coal to make some carbon nanotubes. And then for our final recipes, we're going to need to head outside, where we'll kill a couple of zombies for some rotten flesh. We also need to kill some skeletons for some bones. We will combine up 9 carbon nanotubes along with 9 cellulose, which will end up making 9 sticks for us. We can also make some sand by combining some glass and silica blocks, which we're going to be needing to make some dirt. We use the rotten flesh to make some protein paste, and then combined all that up to make some organic sand. Using those 9 sticks, we can combine them up into a bundle of sticks, which can be combined with a block of cellulose to make a sapling. Finally, we'll combine that enriched sand with some protein fiber to make some dirt. And now that we finally have some dirt and a sapling, let's head outside to start growing some trees. They have the twerk mod enabled in this mod pack, but it seems to work better when you run around as well. I'm going to be playing it safe and not vein mining the whole tree, that way I can guarantee getting a sapling by making a crook. But first I'm going to want a crafting table on a stick, that way I can craft anywhere on the go. Just be sure to choose the second one, as this one has keybinds that you can use, and the other one doesn't. Using the crook, we're basically guaranteed to get some saplings, so now it's time to start growing a bunch of trees. Now that we have a little bit of wood going, I'm going to make some doors for storage, and then I'm going to craft up an oak barrel, which we're going to be using to start making even more dirt. We can automate this process by setting up a couple hoppers, and then in the top barrel we'll feed some leaves, which we can easily get since we can make shears out of the tier 1 ore. So while we wait for that to start going, let's grow a bunch more trees, since we're going to need about 5 stacks of wood in order to make a wood singularity. We'll be sure to keep placing a bunch more dirt, that way we can grow more trees at the same time. Once we have that wood chopped up, let's go ahead and make that singularity, and then we'll be just about done with growing trees. Let's also make sure we're keeping up on crafting those tier 4 ores, as we're going to need 320 ingots of these as well to make a singularity. We're not going to be spending the majority of this mod pack outside, so I'm just going to move the resource generators out here, that way I can access them just a bit easier. Our final step for trees is going to be adding some silkworms to them. These will infest the leaves over time, which we'll be able to break for a ton of string once they're finished. Let's get a little organization set up, and place down a bunch of drawers for all the resources we're going to generate. Let's just place some hoppers on top of them. That way the resources will automatically get pulled out. We only have a couple singularities at the moment, but by the end of this pack we'll have well over 40. Now let's finally grab that string up, which we're going to be using to craft some string meshes. These meshes are going to need to go in some sieves, so let's craft up at least 25 of them. That way we can place down the maximum number of a 5x5. Let's also place down a couple drawers, that way we can store all the stuff we'll be sifting. The first thing we're going to need to sift is some dirt, so let's manually craft up a bunch more, that way we can make a dirt singularity. At the same time, I'm going to break down some sand into dust, which we can place into a barrel with some water to make some clay. Let's combine that clay up with some bone meal to make some porcelain, and it looks like we're just one shy, so to get a little more bone meal without killing skeletons, we can sift through some silica. We almost have everything we need to make a crucible now. The last step is just waiting on that last bit of dirt. Once we finally reach 128 dirt, we can convert it into a singularity. And while that crafts up, it looks like we have enough tier 4 ore to make a tier 4 singularity. The goal here is to rush into tier 5, that way we can make a ton of max level resource generators. So let's start combining up those tier 4 ores into the final tier. Now that we have a consistent supply of dirt, we can finally start sifting through it, which will give us access to a ton of different types of pebbles. We're mostly interested in the andesite, diorite, and granite pebbles, as we'll be able to sift those stones for new resources. To finish making our crucible, we'll need to break down some granite, which we'll be combining with clay to make some aggregate, the final piece for crafting a crucible. All we have to do is cook that crucible inside a blast furnace, and while that's cooking up, let's make a campfire for it, which will be our fastest way of generating lava for now. We can feed this basically any stone type, so I'm just going to give it some basalt, since we won't be using that for anything else. So while that lava is cooking up, let's sift through a bunch more dirt, that way we can get access to singularities for the granite, diorite, and andesite. I'm also going to go ahead and set up a super efficient cobblestone generator, that way it'll take almost no time to make a cobblestone singularity. This cobblestone generator is specifically designed if you have Ultimine installed, so obviously if you're playing vanilla this is not very efficient. I also noticed at this point that I put it one too low, so let's raise that up by one block. And then just place down a hopper at the bottom of any of the sides. We've been pretty efficient, so we're still waiting on that lava, so in the meantime let's make those singularities, and make sure that we still have enough tier 5 ores queued up. For now I'm going to craft up a tier 4 resource generator, which we'll only need 1 or 2 of, as our tier 5s are almost complete. After placing in the singularities we just made, let's head over to the lava as it's finished cooking up. Then just place it inside our cobblestone generator, which will allow us to generate 8 cobblestone every break. Although in this mod pack I noticed that it generates a little weird. Kinda does like diagonals? I don't know, it's not that big of a deal. Once we break it 8 times, we should have 2 stacks of cobblestone, which is plenty enough to make a singularity. This is where our tier 4 generator is going to come in handy, as this will generate resources much faster than our tier 2s. The first thing we're going to do is get 2 stacks of cobblestone, which we can then place down into the world using a stone wand, and then break down into gravel using a stone hammer. And then once we get 2 stacks of gravel, we can make a singularity for it. Then we'll just have to repeat that same process to make singularities for both sand and dust. So with those singularities crafted up, let's add those into our resource rows, as we'll be needing tons of each of those for sifting soon. Speaking of sifting, now that we have tons of gravel, let's make a ton of flint with that, and then we'll use that flint to upgrade our meshes into flint meshes. This will be the last tier of meshes that I actually need to make for manually sifting, since very soon here we'll be getting into automatic sifting. Before we can do that, we need to break down a bunch of granite, which we can then sift through our new flint meshes to start getting some nickel and copper. Let's repeat that same process with andesite, which will give us access to zinc and tin. For now, let's just toss those into some blast furnaces, as we'll be using those to craft up a couple create machines. Using a smusher hammer, we can make some nickel plates, then we'll use those zinc nuggets to make some andesite alloys. Now we can craft up 2 encased fans, and for rotational power we'll be using some water wheels. One of our fans will turn into a washing setup, and then we'll toss in a bunch of gravel into it. I'm making sure to only put half a stack at a time, otherwise there won't be enough time for them to be washed before they reach the end of the fan. For the other fan, I'm going to put in a lava bucket, which will turn this fan into a super smelter, allowing tons of items to be smelted at the same time. After washing our gravel, we should be getting some iron nuggets, which the first thing we're going to do with that is to make some chutes. This will allow us to use the fans much more efficiently, as the chutes can only drop 16 items at a time. Let's connect that up to a storage drawer for easy access of adding items. On top of that storage drawer, we can put another chute, that way we can start automating any singularity that we put above it. For now, we're just going to do gravel, as we need a ton of iron to make an iron singularity. So while we're waiting on that iron, I'm going to make some kiln bricks, along with an engineering hammer from Immersive Engineering. Now to turn those kiln bricks into an actual kiln, which will allow us to combine some zinc and copper into some brass. Over at the fans, let's actually go ahead and start collecting this stuff automatically. That way things are just a little bit more organized. To make an iron singularity, we're going to need 2.5 stacks of iron, so we're just about halfway there. In the meantime, let's check up on our final tier ores, as it looks like we finally have 5 stacks of ingots, meaning we can make the final singularity. The iron nuggets are coming along, and at this point in the run I forgot that I needed 2.5 stacks of iron, so I tossed in the 2 stacks that I have into the collapser. Not too big of a deal, we're going to be waiting on that anyways. In the meantime, I'm going to move over our power generation, that way we can start setting up a couple machines outside. So let's connect all those up with cables, which will store just a tiny bit of power while we wait. Looks like our iron is finally done, so let's go ahead and make that singularity, and then we'll use the rest that we have right now to make some infusers from the mechanism mod. These infusers are going to start making some steel for us, so I'm going to change their settings to make sure that they're automatically outputting, since steel needs to be infused twice with coal. We're all done with washing for the rest of the run, so let's go ahead and change that one into another smelting setup, since this side is already set up for auto collecting. Now we can start automatically crafting up some that'll do ingots, which we're going to be needing thousands of soon. Back over to making that automatic sifting setup, we're going to make a couple millstones from the create mod, and then we'll take that brass that we made to make some brass sifters. These are much more powerful than regular sifters, and during testing I only needed about 2 of them for some crazy speeds. To make enough rotational power for all these machines, we're going to be using tons of water wheels. In total, we're going to need at least 32, so this is going to be quite a big setup. The 8 millstones can just be placed right next to each other, and then we'll place the brass sifters up 1 block, that way we can access them from the bottom. The water wheels are also going to be placed up 1 block, since we'll be having water flowing underneath them. We'll just need to stack them all up in a long line, and then place a bunch of water on one side, that way each water wheel is powered. In order for our create machines to be running at maximum speed, we're going to first have to turn all our rotational power into the maximum rotational speed. You can very cheaply do this by connecting up large and small cogwheels together. Then we'll want to face them down, that way they're rotating in the same direction as our millstones and sifters. Now to head back over to those infusers to grab some steel, and then we'll cook it up so that way we can start making some pipes. While we wait for those, let's take some of those ores we've been cooking up, and use them to craft up a bunch more resource generators. For now, let's just replace the ones we currently have, that way we can start cooking ore singularities at maximum speed. Now back to making those pipes, we're going to make both some item pipes as well as some fluid pipes. We're also going to go ahead and make some pipe upgrades. Right now the only gold we have is from recycling some machines, and I'm going to use those to make 2 advanced pipe upgrades. The advanced pipe upgrades are able to distribute items round robin, which we're going to need in order to keep our sifters and millstones constantly supplied. Let's set up a chest for everything that we want to go into the sifters, and then another one for pulling out everything that they go through. We'll be upgrading these chests soon, since they'll eventually be holding thousands of items. Let's also put up a resource generator, since the majority of stuff we're going to sift through is just going to come from a singularity. The first thing we're going to start sifting through is some gravel, that way we can start generating some diamonds. And while we let that run for a quick second, let's set up the millstones. We're also going to pipe items into these, with that advanced upgrade so that way they all run at the same time. Back over our sifters, we have enough diamonds to upgrade our meshes, which will allow us to start generating some emeralds as well. But this chest is getting way too full, so let's upgrade it into a sophisticated storage chest, as well as upgrade it into an iron chest. Then we'll give it some tier 2 stack upgrades, and that should be enough storage in it for the rest of the game. I'm going to sift through a little bit of dust real quick. That way we can get enough redstone to make a singularity, since we'll be using tons of redstone in the near future. This also means that we're going to need more space for singularities, so I'm just going to add another row on top of our current setup, but this time I'll be using some chutes instead of hoppers. That way we can generate resources even faster. We're going to be using those millstones in a little bit, so let's go ahead and finish setting up those pipes. That way we can pull out all the crushed stuff that they'll make, which is just going to go straight into our sifter. Then we can take those emeralds that we've been making and upgrade our meshes from diamond into emerald. We're going to be needing a bit of clay soon, so let's set up a sink so that way we can automatically make some clay. We just need to fill the barrel with water, then we'll pipe in dust and pipe out the clay. Back over at the mechanism generators, we're going to change out the steel crafting, and instead we're going to set these up to start making some alloys for us. That way we can go ahead and start upgrading our machines. For power generation in this mod pack, you have a few options, but you don't end up needing too much power throughout the whole mod pack, so my preferred solution is just to make a bunch of max tier power generators. These things will constantly make power based off the singularity put inside them, with the best singularity being uranium. Our sifter has made plenty of uranium for us, so we'll just need to cook that up to turn it into a singularity. And then in the meantime, we'll just make singularities for everything else that we're missing. The end of the mod pack requires 2,000 items of most singularities, so we want to get those set up as early as possible. Our uranium singularity is crafted up now, so let's add that into our auto smelter, since each power generator that we want to set up is going to need a singularity of its own. Uranium also has another interesting trait. It can be placed under crucibles to make lava at extremely fast rates. So I'm going to go ahead and set up a bunch of these, as we're going to be using tons of lava pretty quickly here. Let's create a little buffer for our lava so that way any excess is going to be stored, with the rest being piped out. And we can keep these crucibles fed by just piping in some cobblestone from a generator. Let's pipe all that lava into a stone barrel, and then we'll set up a similar setup to the clay, except for here we're going to pipe in redstone to turn lava into netherrack. So while we wait for the netherrack to be generated, let's grab our 3 stone types and have those start getting crushed. That way we can start making singularities for all their outputs. Now let's go ahead and make a little setup for all the uranium singularities that we're going to need. Just keep in mind that you have to pipe in items into the top side of the collapser. For mechanism, we only have 2 more machines that we're going to need, those being the crusher and enrichment chamber. Let's just have them set up for now, so that way we can use them in just a little bit. Sifting some silica blocks will allow us to get some mycelium spores, which we'll plant underneath our oak barrel to start making some witch water. Then we can use the clay setup with bone meal instead to start automating some slime. Let's now place those generators down, then hook up some cables so that way when we start generating power, it's all connected. Let's just grab those uranium singularities that we've been crafting up, which I'll be putting in the generators in just a moment. But before we do that, it looks like our netherrack is finally finished crafting up, so let's turn that into a singularity, and then we'll add it over into the millstone setup so that way we can start sifting through some crushed netherrack. Now back over to the power generation. Let's upgrade our cables using some alloys, and then we'll start generating power by adding those singularities into each generator. Then heading back to the sifters, it looks like we've got plenty of gold from our netherrack. So let's take those out of there to smelt up and turn into a singularity. We also want to go ahead and grab some glowstone, and then we'll add it to our lava setup to start automatically making some endstone. The first thing I'm going to do now that we have some gold going is to make a couple netherite ingots, which we can use to upgrade our meshes into netherite tier. Since we can't get normal smithing templates, we had to make our own using the tier 4 ore. We luckily don't have to do very much with mechanism here. I'm just going to craft up a couple of the higher tier alloys, and add a couple upgrades to the machines so that way they run a bit faster. It's important to upgrade the energy cables here, as we're basically going to be using them for energy storage. Heading back over to the witch water, I'm going to turn off the slime production, and then we'll right click it with some sand to get some soul sand. We can't make any soul sand singularities unfortunately, but we instead can make a bunch of soul sand using the fans. We'll just have them pointed into a soul campfire, and then any sand we toss into them will turn into soul sand. Then we're going to add that soul sand into our sifting setup, which will start producing some nether quartz for us. We're also going to get into a digital storage network soon, so let's grab a bunch of Certus quartz dust and start smelting that into silicon. We're also going to do the same thing with some skystone dust to start making some skystone. Let's craft up a storage controller block from sophisticated storage, that way when we make a network it'll connect up to all our chests. Now it's time to start making singularities for all the different ores that we get through sifting. We just need to smelt up about 2.5 stacks of each ore. And while those are getting smelted up, it looks like our end stone is ready. So let's switch this over to start making obsidian by placing water on top of the barrel. Then we'll just turn that end stone into a singularity. By the end of this pack, we're going to need at least 2,000 of each ore type. So let's set up another row of drawers that are going to keep all those ores. And on top of those, we're going to place a bunch of emerald furnaces. These can automatically pull and push items, so no need to put any chutes on them. For digital storage, we're going to need a couple inscribers, so let's do a pretty similar setup for these as well. That way we can start automatically making a bunch of different circuits. This also means we can toss in the silicon that we just made. Heading back inside the house, let's grab our transmutation chamber, along with our disk drive and crafting terminal. Finally, we're going to need that molecular recycler. We're now going to recycle the disk drive, along with the crafting terminal, that way we can start getting some processors. Now inside our transmutation chamber, we can take those processors, and we can turn them into their respective presses. Then for each of our little inscriber setups, we'll just add in the press, and fill the drawers above it with items for each press type. Back to the furnace setup, we need to change all their settings, which we can easily do with the settings tool. And then to finish up the last few presses. We'll just need to grab any of the printed circuits, that way we can combine it with a quartz block to make the silicon press. Sifting through some skystone will start giving us some Fluix crystals, which we're going to use to make some acceleration cards, that way we can make sure our inscribers are running at maximum speed. For this run I decided to go with refined storage. The reason I chose that is because it has some more simple recipes, and the auto crafting with refined storage is much simpler. So to make the refined storage parts, we have to craft up their processors, which need to be smelted inside a furnace. Then for this mod pack, we have to make an AE2 controller, and then we can upgrade that into a refined storage controller. I also made a crafting grid from the refined storage, that way we can actually see and craft with items that are connected to the network. Then we just have to use some external storage buses to connect everything up to our network. And luckily we won't need too many, since we can use drawer controllers to connect up our storage drawers. I'm just going to set them to extract only, that way we don't accidentally put any items into these drawers. Back over to the furnaces, we're going to upgrade them into factory furnaces. This will allow them to smelt with RF, and run at 4 times the speed. Back over to the refined storage system, I'm going to set up the wireless connection, which unfortunately we can only do a limited range of 48 blocks for. We're also going to need a way to power the wireless terminal, so I'm going to start getting into the power mod, and we'll craft up an aerial pearl. We'll have to wait until it's dark to get a zombie to spawn. So in the meantime, let's get our furnaces going with each singularity, as well as connect them up to some power. It's also nighttime now, so let's head over to a zombie to connect our aerial pearl up, and then we can use that to make a wireless player transmitter. This will power items inside our inventory for us, including the wireless terminal we just made. Just be sure to give it a player card that you right click. Let's also connect up another drawer controller, that way we can access all our smelted items inside of our system. We're going to need to get into some industrial foregoing soon, so I'm just going to set up a ton of fluid extractors, that way we can make a ton of latex. Then we'll connect them all up using some fluid pipes. You don't have to give these things power, but they run much faster if you do, so I'm definitely going to connect up the power. These will also run twice as fast if you use acacia logs, but I just found it faster to set up twice as many with oak logs. Now to set up auto crafting with our refined storage system, we'll just need to set a bunch of patterns inside a pattern grid. And of course the first pattern you always make is a pattern for patterns. Then I'm just going to place down some iron crafters facing into the air, and these are going to get all the crafting table recipes. Let's connect up that latex into our system, that way we can also use that in some recipes. Just be sure to change it from item types to fluid types. I'm also going to connect it up to a latex processing unit, along with a sink to provide water into it, that way we can start making some plastic. Then for industrial foregoing, we're going to need a dissolution chamber, which we're going to set up some auto crafting for. just remember to set up an interface, which is going to take any outputs for all these machines, since the crafters can't take items unlike AE2. Now heading about 50 blocks away, we're just going to set up a giant platform, and this is just going to create a very large area for mobs to spawn in during the day. We can easily build this using the building gadget, and just make sure to make it very wide so that way it gets pretty dark underneath. Then we're going to connect up some power into a mob slaughter factory, that way we can start generating some pink slime. Let's also give it some add-ons so that way it can reach the entire area. Let's pump out that pink slime into a tank next to it, and then we'll connect it up to our system the same way we did with the latex. We're going to need to start making 3 different alloys, since we're going to need about 2,000 of each of them. So let's set up a bunch of kiln ovens, that way we can make enough alloys for a singularity of each type. We're going to need to make some electrum, which is made by combining both silver and gold. Then we'll make bronze using tin and copper, as well as invar using iron and nickel. We'll just put 2 of each recipe inside these ovens, that way we can make enough for a singularity of each. We're now going to head over and set up auto crafting for the power mod. This one can be pretty annoying with Refined Storage 1, since we need to do a little redstone setup in order to tell it when to put items in. Also make sure that the crafter is set on pulse mode. For now we'll charge the orb using some basic rods. Then we're going to go ahead and start crafting up some higher tier rods, that way we can quickly make the final recipes that will require the power crafter. Looks like most of our alloys are just about finished up, so let's grab those out and start turning them into singularities. We're going to be needing to smelt up some rotten flesh into leather, and we'll be needing a little bit more of that soon, so let's go ahead and actually set up a crusher so that way we can automatically get some mob drops. We'll just borrow some add-ons from the mob slaughter factory, since we won't need them both on at the same time. We're going to need an AE2 singularity, which means we're going to need a matter condenser, but before we can get into that, we get a visit from a not so welcome friend. Yeah, so I kind of forgot to claim my base, and didn't really realize that. Otherwise I would have tried much harder to run away from that creeper. Luckily it didn't blow up too much stuff that mattered. We'll just have to connect up a few more cables and replace some chests. One of the final crafts is going to require a rainbow core, so let's plant down some grass, that way it has some time to spread, as we're going to need to bone meal it for a couple dyes. Now back to the matter condenser, we'll connect up some water to it, which counts as an item that can be compressed into singularities. We'll just have to craft up a 64K storage part from AE2, that way we can change the settings to start making singularities. And since we're only going to need 1 singularity, an advanced item pipe upgrade should be good enough. Let's go ahead and add an interface to the power setup, since we can't pipe items into the crafter. I'm definitely way too used to using AE2 crafting. We're going to need a few items from some other dimensions, which means we're going to need some dimensional transporters in order to get there. These will require some Enderium. So let's go ahead and make another auto crafting setup for the induction smelter, that way we can start automatically crafting some Enderium. We should now have everything we need to make some cryogenic teleporters, so let's queue up 3 of those as that's how many we're going to need. We're going to make some blaze rods in the multi-servo press. Normally the game has you spawn in blazes in the quest book, but this is much faster. We should have plenty enough rotten flesh to make tons of leather now, which we're going to use to make a high tier jetpack. Heading back over the grass, it looks like it's spread just enough, so let's just spam some bone meal until we get some poppies and dandelions. Those are enough to make all the dyes minus the green dye, which we easily got by smelting some cactus, allowing us to craft up the rainbow core. Now we're going to want to set up a wither soon, and I found the easiest way to do that is to use some witch water. We can convert skeletons into wither skeletons, and creepers into charge creepers. Then we'll just need that charge creeper to blow up the wither skeleton, which will give us a guaranteed wither skull. So let's go ahead and do that 2 more times so that way we can make a wither. Ouchie. Obviously I'm playing a little reckless since this is a speedrun, and sometimes it's just faster to die. Our final item is going to require a bucket of ether gas, so let's set up a wither in a stasis chamber, with a fluid laser base on top of it. This will start extracting ether gas from the wither, just make sure that the laser base has a purple lens, and that it's getting powered by some laser drills. Let's also add a couple add-ons to each of these machines. That way we can really ramp up the speed in which we get the ether gas. We're starting to close in on our final goal here, so let's add in those recipes for each block that'll take us to each dimension. And all these recipes are made inside the Power Crafter. Let's place down those dimensional teleporters, which when given their respective item will allow us to teleport to their dimension. First up, we'll need to make some energized endstone bricks, which will allow us to teleport to the end dimension. Here at the end dimension, we don't actually want to kill the dragon. We're instead going to use our jetpack to fly out to the outer end islands. Here we're going to be searching for an end city, where we need to kill some shulkers for 2 shulker shells, and a levitation core. Once we've gotten those, we'll then search around for some sinkers, which are these weird little cube creatures that we're going to kill for their teeth. And once we finally get 6 teeth, that'll be everything we need to do here in the undimension. Those are all going to be crafted up into a shulker shield, which will allow us to craft up some energized nether bricks. Before we get ahead of ourselves, we're going to need to craft up extended crafting singularities for each of the items that we've been collecting, for a total of 21 different singularities, each of which is going to take 2,000 items. For crafting the singularities, I'm going to set up 4 separate chests so they'll connect up into 4 different compressors. That way we can split up the recipes, that way we can craft these singularities much faster. Checking up on our ether gas production, it looks like we already have a bucket's worth. So let's grab one of those out, and then we'll kill the wither since we also need a nether star. We'll just set up the mob crusher facing the wither, and then we'll turn off the stasis chamber. Then I'm just going to kind of hope that the crusher kills it before it moves away. Which, guess what? Did not happen. That's okay, I'll just bait the wither into the crushing area by digging down a couple blocks. We're also going to need to craft up a platinum resource singularity, which will be the final one that we have to make. As for the recipes for the singularity, they're kind of annoying. Since this is refined storage 1, you can only put up to 64 of an item inside the recipe, unlike AE2 where you can custom set it to any value. But it's not too big of a deal, as I'm just going to set it to 20, and then when I need a singularity, I'm going to request 100 of them. That way it'll end up pushing out enough items to make 1 singularity. I'm just going to be sure to spread out the recipes so that way all the compressors are working at the same time. Then we'll just have to go through each singularity and start requesting them. And I almost forgot that I should definitely add some stack upgrades into these chests. Getting right back to where we left off, let's take those energized nether bricks, and we'll use them to teleport into the nether. Here in the nether is going to be quite a quick trip, unless you end up getting very unlucky. We're just going to search through all these lava lakes for these pillars, until we find a pillar that has a blaze lantern. And all we have to do is mine that up. In order to make the final craft, we're going to need 2 of them, so we'll just have to search around for another one. Now we can use our nether star and one of those blaze lanterns to make a nitro capacitor, and then we're just waiting on the singularities to make the final item. Speaking of singularities, let's grab out that AE2 one. Then I'm going to set up a crafter into a chest, that way we can add the recipe for the ultimate singularity, and I can just manually craft that inside the ultimate crafting table. With the ultimate singularity complete, we now have everything we need to make the energized Adoduvium. Let's just get ready to put this into the teleporter, as it's going to take us to the overworld, and once we do that, we've completed the modpack. And that is it. We've successfully escaped the Winter Wonderland, and completed the Cuboid Outpost pack, all in 3 hours and 37 minutes. I want to thank you all for watching, and give a shout out to all my supporters on YouTube, Discord, and Patreon. If you want to support me too and get access to my speedrunning guides, go ahead and check out the link in the description. With all that said, Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays! So that is the story of our dear little flame, who escaped that cold winter land with the record for speedrunning the game. From a small little cabin to the creation of flight, Merry Christmas to all, and to all, a good night.